When it comes to these few similarities between the Old Testament chaos and pagan chaos, I wanted to mention Psalms like 74, 93, and 29, which we cannot read because these are whole Psalms. They associate chaos camp with Yahweh's kingship the same way like Canaanite or Ugaritic Baal's victory over Yam, the goddess Yam, or Babylonian Marduk's kinship with his overcoming of Tiamat. This is according to John Day. Another similarity would be that Leviathan was a dragon that accompanied Yam, so it was like a pet to this goddess Yam. We can also see that Baal also defeated Leviathan the same way as Yahweh defeats Leviathan. So these are just similarities, right? We also can tell that Elohim, so the biblical Elohim, and El, when it comes to the Canaanite or the Ugaritic account, are both supreme gods of creation who had a close relationship with the waters. This is according to David Tsumura. So when it comes to these similarities, how much do you think they're tightly connected or necessarily borrowing from each other compared to or versus well, maybe they had some similar stories. They were like oral traditions written much later, but they originated maybe from the same region.
Yeah, this connects to what we were talking about earlier about if you can take all of these texts and kind of pick them apart and say, this was written here, and this came from there, and this was from this writer. Uh, and like I said, these themes are so broad that it's really hard to really even say, well, it, people love to say the Bible stole from these other writers, but you see how broad this topic was. And if you look at the texts from the ancient world, if you're able to actually line up the tablets and all of the things that we have the same story in slightly different ways again and again and again and again. So their idea of how writing worked and the purpose of texts was very different from ours. In our world today, if you are a writer, you want to write something original. You want to have something that people have never read before. And you're really mad if somebody takes your idea that you already had first. That's called plagiarism. That's in our world. And they had that during the time of Jesus to some degree. You actually have people talking about plagiarism and stealing ideas. But that was a very kind of new idea. That's not how we see ancient texts, or at least we have zero evidence of anybody talking about, hey, you stole my idea. Why did you do that? That was my idea. No, it was like this whole matrix of ideas that just kind of went along, and your originality to the story would have been connected to your particular circumstance. Like kings would commission new writing because they wanted to have themselves in this story. So we do have letters from kings and between kings and writers or scribes and things saying commissioning these kinds of stories. But they weren't just making up the stories whole cloth. They would be taking the same ideas that everybody was already used to and repurposing those same ideas. If you read the Baal cycle and you read Enuma Elish, there is so much similarity, but I don't hear anybody talking, oh, those Babylonians, they stole that idea. Or if you read the different versions of the Gilgamesh epic, like there's slight variations every time. And is that because they couldn't quite get their story together? They couldn't quite just get it right? No, it's because they were okay with some changes. And those changes probably had very particular meaning to the people at the time. So it's trying to say that somebody stole things from somebody, and that's just the wrong way to look at it. You need to be embedding yourself in this framework that these were the ideas you just took for granted. everybody thought this way. Everybody believed in this theme of chaos and the idea that you go out into the world and it's dangerous. You come back into civilization and it's nice and neat and ordered, or at least it should be. And why was it nice and neat and ordered? Because the king made it that way. That's how they were thinking. So this was what we are seeing in the Bible, but we don't see that God has to defeat anyone in particular in order to get his order accomplished. Now, that being said, I think you can look at it a little more subtly than that, and I just did in my last podcast episode, and I'm going to continue looking at that theme because I think that the way God works is he doesn't just do everything himself. Like the gods of the pagan nations, they would want people to serve people. But that's why they made people, or at least that's what their stories say. They made people so that people would serve them. And so there's this kind of idea that humans are only good for the gods as long as the gods are getting use out of us. That's not the relationship God has with humanity at all. And that's what we see in the biblical narrative. But at the same time, God loves participating with humanity. He wants to loop us into what he's doing. And so he's not, we're not just chess pieces on a board. He's not just directing us exactly and saying, okay, you go over there because I want that right now. And you go over there because that's what I want now. So because he's using us, then we are looped into the idea of what does that mean about chaos and the world. So
Yeah, I remember reading for our first episode some of the pagan accounts, and man, their gods are a mess. I have to say this, and I mean it's true because people were created just to serve as a labor, and God forbid they were too loud, because if they were too loud, well then the flood would come and just destroy them. So if that's not a definition of having no rights and being a slave, I don't know what is the better definition.